What a fantastic conference this has been so far. I've learned an enormous amount here, and I hope that I'll be able to impart some information to you. There's been a phrase in the forecasting business is there are two kinds of forecasts, wrong and lucky. I'm feeling lucky tonight, so let's see how we do this. I'm the author of this book, The End of Doom, and one of the ways I make my living is to go back and remind people what they said, and usually they don't like that. Because usually they're predicting that the world is going to come to an end in some imminent period of time. What this book does, and I try to do this as objectively as possible, is to look at the major, larger global environmental trends, and most of them turn out to be positive. And let me see if I can prove that to you today. This particular chart is from the International Institute for Systems Dynamics. And what it's trying to do is to show how population might evolve over the course of the next 3 centuries or so. And the baseline here is that they expect or project that human life expectancy will go up to 120 years. Right now it's 70 years. So they expect over this period of time that human life expectancy would go up 50 years. And so what would this do? Well, what they're projecting is that as human fertility continues to decline, and total fertility has been declining. In 1960, the average woman on planet Earth had 6 children. Now it's down to 2.3 and continues to fall. And what you would follow, if you follow some of these scenarios, the ones where women are having fewer than 2 children over the period of time, human population will peak in this century. In fact, none of you in this room will ever see another doubling of human population, most likely, under these scenarios. And in fact, if the total fertility rate were to fall to what it is in East Asia now, world population would peak at about 8 billion people and decline to 4 billion by the end of this particular period of time. So those people who are worried about that, what this means is greater reproductive freedom will be available to people. And why would people have fewer children? Well, among other reasons is what I call the education effect. One of the great things about education is that as people have more opportunities for work, more opportunities for entertainment, more opportunities for just experiences of life, which education provides them, and in particular, educated women, what this does is provide them greater ability to control their own fertility and participate in the market economy. People choose to have fewer children. What this is basically a scenario that was devised for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, showing how education is likely to evolve over this century. And again, it could connote peaking population. Urbanization, another trend. For the first time in human history, more people live in cities than live on the rural landscape. This occurred earlier in this decade. And the UN projects that what will happen is that by the end of this century, 80 to 90% of people will be living in cities. This again would show and is an indication of what would likely happen to population trends. The more people move into cities, the fewer children they have. Again, because, well, among other things, children no longer are capital items for the family, they are becoming luxury consumption items. Many of you all may be luxury consumption items as far as your parents are concerned. So there are other opportunities that occur in urbanization. I worked on a PBS documentary. I was a producer many years ago where we were looking at population trends, and we went to Italy and we gathered a bunch of Italian women in a room and we're asking them, we'd done this in America, so why are women having fewer children in Italy? Italy at the time had the lowest total fertility rate in Europe. And so the usual reasons were given: men are unreliable, we have our own careers now, cities are so expensive. But my favorite answer, and this shows some of what's going on as well, is a grandmother in the back raised her hand and said, and besides, today women have cats. Cats, children. So, but the great news is that as people move into cities, what will be happening again is that the rural population will drop from 3.6 billion people today to about 1.8 billion. It'll be cut in half, which means that fewer and fewer people will be living on the landscape, which will give a possibility and opportunity for the restoration of nature, a rewilding of the planet, as it were. And this is part of the indication of that, peak farmland. We are probably at peak farmland even as we're speaking now. This is research done by Jesse Ausable and his group at Rockefeller University. And what this projection is, I don't know how many of you may remember this, but in 1968, Paul Ehrlich predicted, and I believe this is a direct quote, hundreds of millions of people are going to starve to death in the 1970s despite any crash program that might be embarked upon now. Totally wrong. And he was wrong for this reason, is that farmers and seed companies and so forth were able to increase the productivity of the land so it would produce 2 and 3 times more food on the same amount of land. This trend is going to continue into the future and probably accelerate. The thing to keep your eye on is the lower of the blue lines there. Basically, that indicates that in about 50 years, less than 50 years, if this works, and we get rid of biofuel subsidies, by the way, this is crucial, we have to get rid of those, that basically the amount of land just from farming productivity that will return to nature would equal an area the size of the United States east of the Mississippi. Again, restoration and rewilding of nature will be possible. This is basically Europe from 1900 to 2010. The population of Europe doubled over this period of time. More people moved into cities. The farmland shrank, and in fact, Europe is becoming greener over time. This same dynamic is taking place in many, many other places around the world. To that extent, we look to a great future in that regard. Now, another way I try to think about trying to make forecasts and predictions, how well would some of the smartest people in the world have done, say in 1900? This would be notionally Albert Einstein, Marie Curie, and Thomas Edison. We get them in a room and say, so what will people be using in 2016? How much energy? How many people will there be? How much resources will they be using? How big will the cities be? Would they have been able to predict it? Well, keep in mind, at the time in 1900, which they considered a very modern time, automobiles had just more or less been invented. Electricity were in some cities and so forth. There were no refrigerators, no airplanes, no air conditioners, no computers, no antibiotics, I don't even know how these people lived. And you think about it, they didn't. Average life expectancy on planet Earth in 1900 was 35 years. It's 70 years now. It's doubled since that time. We stand exactly the same relation to people in the year 2100. We are as ignorant as the smartest people on the planet were a century ago in that regard. And we're very smart people. So is there any way to possibly get some clue to how the world might evolve over the rest of the century? And this, I hope, encompasses a great deal of information. This is basically a chart from a report done for the Australian government called the Garnaut Climate Change Review. And what this is indicating, if we could show this, is how economic growth is likely to evolve along with population over the remainder of the century. In the year 2000, world GDP was about $60 trillion. It'll go up 18-fold, essentially $1 quadrillion over the next part of the century is the projection here. Given the population will grow a bit, but mainly be flat, per capita income will grow 12 times. In other words, it will grow from the current average on planet Earth of $10,000 a person to about $120,000 a person. If this unfolds in that way, this will mean, of course, because almost all economic growth now is the result of technological progress and the creation of wealth through technological progress, that means that our descendants, the people, many of you actually, I hope, will be living then, will be able to have at their disposal amazing technologies and an amazing amount of wealth to take care of and address any of the problems that are arising, including the problem of climate change. Now, people will go, well, Ron, that's just a projection. How could this possibly be happening? The truth of the matter is we already did it. We did this in the 20th century. In 1900, the world's GDP was merely $3 trillion. It grew to $60 trillion over that time. World population did quadruple over that time. So, in fact, the average per capita income only went up $2,000 on average to $10,000. But it was an enormous increase in human wealth and happiness as a result of that kind of thing. We've done it before. we can do it again, but it's a critical thing, and actually Bejoy, among other people, and Eric talking, the thing that guarantees that is if we maintain the 3 discoveries that humanity made that lifted humanity out of the abject poverty, which is our natural state. And those 3 things, and I'll very briefly reference them, is liberal science, which is how we learn how the truth is. Basically, it's completely free speech. Anybody can criticize anybody else. Free markets, liberal free markets, in which people can trade and truck among themselves and cooperate and create the technologies and innovations that make the world better. And liberal politics, liberal democratic politics, which allows us to innovate socially so that we can open up spaces for everybody to participate and become creators. And if we maintain those 3 and continue to grow them, then this world will be the world that comes true. I can't predict what the technologies will be, but I can predict that it will be a better world. In fact, I would like to say that not only will there be an end to doom, I would like to invite you to contemplate the amazing and abundant future that lies ahead for humanity if we can sustain it this way. In conclusion, I do not fear for future generations. Instead, I absolutely rejoice for them. This is the future that we can give them if we will try. Thank you very much. It was a delight to chat with you.